Hey, I'm with former Marine, current OSU senior in the College of Social Work, Tom Wike. We're just discussing some common interests that we have, how we're handling the pandemic, what life after the military looks like. And I'm grateful to have you. So thanks for your time. I know that there's not a lot of it going around these days.
Thank you.
Yeah, tell me, for those of us who aren't familiar with you, military background, and what you're doing at school right now.
So I was in the Marines, motor T, so I drove big trucks. I was first stationed in Okinawa, Japan with Combat Logistics Battalion 4, deployed to Afghanistan 2012, came back, stayed in Japan for about another year, and then went to North Carolina, joined 210, which is an artillery unit, did a bunch of training exercises. Then I went back to Japan on a UDP. We were supposed to go on a boat to Europe, but they canceled that, so they sent me back to Japan instead. So that's always
Uh,
fun.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I did a bunch more training ops on the mainland and in Korea, and then came back home and got out. So, and
yeah.
then transitioned, fumbled around for a little bit there, and then started school, and then fumbled around through different majors and
Mm-hmm.
landed in social work. So now I'm here.
Yeah. So all said and done, how many years were you in?
Uh, 4.5 active, and then about 6 months in the reserves.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. What was that decision like for you to stay or go? Was that a difficult one?
Not really. So I got NJP'd when I was in. So pretty much everyone's like, your career's done already.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, there's a lot of people wanting me to stay because they're like, you're a good motor T operator, you're still a good leader, we still like you and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
my decision was, well, I could do another 4 years, maybe make sergeant, but I probably won't get staff. So then I'm gonna get maxed out at 10 and get kicked out.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the point of putting in another 6 years just to, then it's kind of pointless in a career field. And then I got to
Sure.
start all over anyway. Um, so I figured I might as well just get out now and then start my career all over again and go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And where is home base? Where did you live before you left for the Marines?
Uh, so I grew up mostly in Ohio, but then my
Yeah.
parents, when I was in high school, moved to South Carolina, so I ended up uh, enlisting out of there.
Okay. Okay. So once you got out, did you go right back to South Carolina or Ohio?
Yeah, so I lived with my parents for about a month, and then I got a job at the Boilermakers Union up in
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland. My
Yeah. Yeah.
grandfather, my grandfather was a Boilermaker. My brother was a Boilermaker.
Okay.
So I tried that out for a little bit, and after realizing that there wasn't a whole lot of work in Ohio,
Mm.
because they're shutting down all the coal plants, so there's not a whole lot of work really.
Yeah.
And then we were mostly living out of shitty hotels in like Detroit, so I kind
Mm-hmm.
of got tired of that. So I figured it's best to get a
Yeah.
college degree, so I went to live in flea bag hotels. So
Yeah. There's a shelf life, I think, to that. So, um, you mentioned something I think that I don't want to speak for everybody, but a lot of us anyway, kind of struggle with. I can't remember the word you said. Um, um, did you say fumbled, or you try to navigate it anyway, life post military? Um, but what was that process like for you? Um,
so I'd like to start back with the TAP program, the transition program. The way they kind of like fill your head with like you're a veteran, so everyone's gonna want you and love you.
yeah.
Just take this resume that we helped you write, which is pretty much just your military service. Because I think before I only worked at Walmart, and I got out and I sent out probably about like 200 resumes, and nobody wanted anything to do with me. I got no callbacks. So then I kind of leaned back on my driving thing because everyone's like, "Well, you're a motor T. Why don't you get your what do they call it? Your
CDL or something?
yeah CDL. There
Mm,
you go, like Class A CDL." Um, and I was like, "Well, I really don't want to drive anymore. I'm kind of tired of that." And also
yeah.
sitting in that position and all day long is really bad for you.
Hmm.
Um, so I've known guys that drove for like 30 years, like a bus or stuff like that, and they're just all beat up, from
Yeah.
just sitting in that position because we're not as humans we're not designed to just sit there all day long
Sure.
and do that. Um, so I wasn't something I was, so I, after the Boilermakers, I ended up having to go, well, I didn't have to, but I chose to go work at UPS. So I
Hmm.
drove around a truck for that for a little bit. And then eventually I loaded vehicles as well.
Yeah.
So I kind of leaned on since they're Teamsters, I kind of leaned on another union, stuff
Got
like
it.
that.
Got it.
Um, and then because most of that was temp work though. So I worked like a season, then I got time off, and then I ended up working at like grocery stores, and I worked like in a bakery. I worked so yeah, I bounced around to like a lot of a lot of different jobs.
Yeah,
Just
sure.
I worked in a factory. I made lawnmower parts.
Hmm.
So um, yeah, I just didn't know where I was going. I was just trying to keep my head above water. And if I didn't get connected with the VA and get disability, I don't know how I would have survived, to be honest with you. So like guys who don't like get out and they have problems and they don't get connected, I don't know how they survive, to be honest with you.
Huh. What do you think, from your education perspective as well, and then also just your military experience, how do you make sense of that lack of connection that a lot of veterans have with the VA?
So it could be that you've had bad experiences in your service, so you don't want to be connected with anything that's military related. I've
Hmm.
seen that. It's also like pride, I don't need that. That's for weak people,
Yeah.
or maybe they don't feel like that they're not worthy enough. Those
Hmm.
are those are probably the biggest ones. The other is like they just get discouraged. Like I have to do all this paperwork. I have to go to all these different appointments and stuff. Like I feel like when I was going through the process too, I didn't meet anybody who was a veteran, and I
Hmm.
felt like I had to keep explaining myself, and I felt like these people didn't know who I was, and I thought like before I even got my rating and stuff, I was like, these people are probably gonna screw me over. I went through all this, and that was like my whole thought process. Like I have to explain myself. You people don't understand me,
Hmm.
so that was it was kind of a weird experience at the time. Yeah, I wasn't really trustworthy too with people. Um, I didn't know at the time, but I post-traumatic stress. I had a lot of anxiety. I was drinking a lot,
Hmm.
um, isolating. So I was going
Hmm.
through a lot in my own head. So
Sure.
that's
Sure. Yeah. Can I ask what it was that made you the exception to that? Like, what was it in your mind that helped you kind of overcome some of those typical barriers that a lot of people experience? I'm glad you pointed that out too, if I could interject or jump in, which, like, a lot of those barriers are quite benevolent. I've heard the one that you mentioned quite frequently, which is, I don't want to take up resources for someone who really needs it, or from someone who really needs it. And the VA has something to say for that. As healthcare providers, we have something to say for that. But um, how did you navigate those barriers that people experience?
I think I was kind of lucky. So I relied a lot on a support system.
Mm.
So my girlfriend at the time was my wife now. Like
Mhm.
she was a really great support. My grandfather was a veteran, so
Yeah.
he helped me a lot as well. That's the best thing is like try not to isolate, I guess, and then just try to lean on. And also like I feel like it's luck of the draw too, like because depending on who does your rating that day, how they're feeling, kind of that's how it goes.
Yeah.
So I mean that was kind of my feeling as well. It's like I just got lucky and I ended up with a decent rating.
Hmm.
So that way I was able to supplement my income and
Hmm.
and keep my head above water. Because when I first got out, I was on unemployment. I think I was making like 340 a week,
Hmm.
and that's yeah, that's not cutting it. So
Insufficient, right? Yeah. Yeah.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's I, I think that's part of it. It's just like where you go, maybe what VA facility you talk to or who you work with. I think it just depends on that as well.
Yeah.
And that was part of it too. So like when I talked to other people, so when I first got out when I went to South Carolina, the VA was supposed to have all my appointments ready to meet with me, and they
Okay.
didn't.
Oh,
So I was already kind of discouraged. And
sure.
then I ended up talking to my grandfather, and he goes, "Well, why don't you come up back to Ohio? And I know this VA facility, and it's a lot better." So that's what I ended up doing. So he connected me with them, and then that's kind of what it is. You gotta do your research. And that's kind of what I've been doing ever since. Is like just been like a seeker and looking for as much information as possible. Be a continuous learner. Always try to find everything.
Yeah.
That's because no one's gonna tell you, and it's a lot like your military career. You can only take care of you. Nobody else is gonna do it.
You got to
So
advocate for yourself.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. You spoke and kind of alluded to the social support. I think that's one of the things that's so disillusioning about transitioning out of the military as well, is that there is this inherent automatic camaraderie that I suppose a lot of people don't experience, and it's quite isolating for some. But more often than not, what we tend to hear is like, it's a brotherhood, it's a family, and it's quite disorienting when we no longer have that. It's pretty abrupt. It's not this smooth transition always. Um, can you speak to your experience of social support in the military or post military? You alluded to a little bit, but maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I was always around great, so when you're in Okinawa, like you're stuck on a small island with a bunch of people, so you have no
Mm.
choice but to be their friends. Um,
Yeah, that'll do it, right? Yeah.
so I felt like that was probably the best unit that I know. I like that was probably one of the best units I was in, was with being with those guys. I mean, also when you're in Okinawa, you either become like a gym rat or like an alcoholic, or they say a
Okay.
Bible thumper, but I never saw anybody become a Bible thumper. So I saw like the opposite, people who were very religious not be religious anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, so so
One of those three, though, huh? That was
yeah,
typical. Yeah.
you're
Okay.
supposed to be.
Got it.
Um,
Got it.
so yeah. And that was probably, and I went to Afghanistan with this guy, so I mean it just
Mm,
built like a really great relationship.
for sure.
And then when I came to the States, like there wasn't that camaraderie, because it wasn't, everyone would go out, to the E Club, or go out to like a small, because there's only small little towns surrounded by the bases out there. So you all
Hmm.
would be seeing each other at the bar and stuff like that. And that wasn't
Right.
like that in the States. And I noticed a lot of guys, now that we had vehicles, because we most of us didn't have cars over there, a lot of guys that when they transitioned to the States, they all had DUIs. And it just didn't feel the same. So like nobody hung out at the barracks really. Everyone was trying to
Hmm.
like go be with their families or stuff, and it was a different feeling. So I guess I was kind of like working my way down to like getting out. But it's kind of weird now, because I feel like the guys that I knew in the States, I have like a close relationship to the guys that I had in Okinawa,
Huh.
because we had a smaller motor T unit, so there was only like 10 of
Okay.
us
Yeah.
within that Army battery. So we
Got it.
became pretty close as well.
Yeah.
So and then once you get out, like I remember the day too, like I stayed like an extra day and like slept in somebody's room because I wasn't ready. I
Wow.
was
Wow.
excited. I was excited to leave, but I was like, I know I'm not this. I don't know. For me, it was like, cool. I got my DD2 14. I'm free. And then it's like immediately like, oh shit, what am I going to do? So,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
and,
Right.
and then I hung out with the guys for one last night, drank a little bit at the barracks. And then the next morning I got up and drove to my parents' house.
Mm.
And there's a really great video that the Raider Project does. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but I would recommend checking that out.
Okay.
This is one of the organizations that I looked for when I got out. So about after a year I got out, I went to a seminar that they were holding in North Carolina. And it was just mind blowing within like the first couple minutes, because they talk about the like 7 stages of transition and what you feel and stuff. And it goes through, and what I didn't realize either until I became a social worker too, is like, when you get out, like it's grief. So you're going through like the 5 stages of grieving.
Sure.
And I never thought of it that way. Um, so it's kind of like, this is something I found out like maybe like 6 months ago when I was with the Pat Tillman people.
Hmm.
So that was something as well. Is like I didn't realize I was going through all this grief,
Sure.
denial and all these other things, or it was So, and at times things got dark. I was drinking a lot, Um, I had access to weapons as well, so
Hmm.
there's a possibility of self-hurt.
Sure.
That's I think like what 90% of male suicides is using firearms.
Yeah.
So
Right.
like that's another. So I think that was one of the things I told myself when I was going through these dark times. Like I don't want to be one of those statistics.
Mm-hmm.
That was like one of the main driving factors. Like I don't want to be a statistic.
It's interesting you bring that up, because I think everybody's got to find. I heard Jocko Willing talk about in some podcast clip, like you got to find an alternative purpose, and even if a purpose is like not being a statistic, that's sufficient for a season. I think we got to find like a robust one, or one that like will sustain us for different seasons. But yeah, initially or for a period of time, I think that's quite important. How would you advise people, or what's your experience of people kind of finding that purpose, or navigating those stressors that people feel, especially that loss of purpose? Um,
Yeah, that's the big thing, because you're also going through an identity crisis. That was like
sure.
my main thing. Is like, well, if I'm not green anymore, then who am I? I'm supposed to be like the best fighting force in the world,
Hmm.
and now I was in charge of like I look at it like Rambo at the end of like what was that First Blood, where he's like,
Yeah.
I was in charge of $1 million equipment and I
Yeah.
can't even
Yeah.
drop a car wash. Like that's
I
who I
drove
am.
tanks. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
What am I?
Totally.
So that was like my feeling, and and like I said, I fumbled around. So you just have to try everything and anything really until it sticks. I I say network until you die, because the majority of things, like if you're trying to get a job, because that's what most people correlate their purpose to, is jobs, which I don't always think that you should do that too. Um, it should be more of like a purpose, like I want to help, stop poverty or something like that. I'm more focused on like public service and like social justice stuff with my degree. So I'm not trying to tell everybody. I mean, if you want to go make $1 million, that's your purpose. I mean, go for it.
Sure. Don't
Self-determined
forget
now.
us when you do, though.
Right.
Yeah.
um, so that was and that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to reach out to so many people, hear their stories, figure out how they navigate. Even now, I still do that.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Yeah. Sure.
listening to like Obama's book and trying to see how he went from like being an organizer to like the president. So
Sure.
like that was the probably thing I would say is like find out other people's stories, figure out how they do it.
Yeah.
Go to like I try to go as many conferences as I can, even if I don't think they're worth anything, because sometimes I'll just meet people that will put me in right, to meet somebody else. So it's building that network as well. And that's where I learned like my love for like policy, was going to like Student Veterans America's national convention in San Antonio. I think that was back in 2017. And I saw these veterans like working in policy and doing all these great things. And I was like, holy shit, like we have this power. Like, when did this happen? So it was like,
who was supposed to tell me about this too?
You're right. Yeah, it was like an aha moment where I see all these people like doing these great things, and it just inspired me to do more as well.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing too, is like find you lost your tribe, so now you need to find your new tribe and figure out where you belong in the world. And that's really what you have to do. I guess you got to figure out yourself, and you got to suffer through it. We grow through suffering. So like, don't get like stuck down or bogged down in that suffering, but just I guess embrace a certain level of it, that that this too shall pass, and that it doesn't always stay there.
Yeah, it's we do that. So I don't know. I think that there's a whole book to be written, probably has already, about generalizing strengths or things that we've already done in the military, for the transition or for the post-military life. Like how many times have we been told to embrace the suck? That applies, and all the skills and strategies and mechanisms by which we do that applies to post-military life as well, is what I hear you saying. I think we overlook some of those things that have often come naturally to us and maybe don't see their application or relevance to the situation that we're currently in. That's a good word. It's a good word. So fumbling, like how did that take place for you? What was that process like of navigating? You said job, and then navigating, like you started school and then you navigated different majors, and
that was
around as well. You said that was fun. Yeah.
It was incredibly stressful, because the one thing I kept thinking the whole time is like, well, I have this educational benefit and I have a timeline pretty much, like months, and it's like, if I don't take the right classes, if I don't do the right things, then I just wasted all this. I wasted all the time I put in energy I put in the Marine Corps to get this educational benefit, and then I wasted all this time at school. So I put a ton of stress on myself. So please don't be that person. But I started off in education. I thought I wanted to be a school teacher, and then I started at Columbus State, because Ohio State didn't even want me to begin with. I took a class when I was on active duty, just so I could get out of field day, and I got like a D in it, and so I had like a 1.0 GPA. So they're like, nice. we don't want you. So which brings me to another story about just reaching out to people, because I went to like the military and veteran service office, and there was some student at the desk, and I had a half an hour conversation with them, and they're like, go to Columbus State, do this, do that, do this. So they told me like how to like navigate things as well. So Columbus State, did about 1.5 years there, did really well, got like a 4.0, transferred over, got into the education college, did really well there. And then I did my like you do like 2 field placements. So you do like your first one, like your initial one. So I did that, and I ended up in like a middle school in Hilltop, so it's like lower socioeconomic class. And it was an eye-opening experience, because I noticed that there was like no resources for these kids. Like they had no after-school activities. There's no air conditioning in the buildings. There's you can't let the kids go outside if it's too hot or too cold. They were like stuck in the gyms. They couldn't like I guess the administration didn't do a whole lot of great jobs. I don't want to like start talking trash on people, but they weren't. But I wouldn't say it's their fault either. I mean, they didn't have the resources to equip to actually help these children. And there's a lot of outside forces as well. And that's what I learned. Like only like 16% of a kid's like time in school like actually affects them. Like the rest of it's all outside forces. So it could be like,
Say that statistic again, that percentage, if you would.
I think it was 16% of like affecting a child's life is actually from being in school.
You say 6-0?
The rest of it is all outside. 16.
1-6. Got it.
Once.
Okay. No. I can't hear you. I couldn't hear you. 16%. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the rest of it's like outside forces. It could be like your parents or your nutrition or how much
smoke.
you got. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and then I noticed like a lot of these kids, there'd be a lot of kids that show up and a lot of kids that don't show up. And then like some you never see ever again. And I asked the teacher, and she's like, well, what happened to that kid? He's like, oh, their parents got evicted, so they're in a different school district now. So like at the first of the month, like evictions happen. So all these kids that we had are gone.
Wow.
And, yeah. So it was, and I was like, that's when I kind of realized like I didn't want to be a teacher anymore because I couldn't affect enough change.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of my classes kind of showed that where we're like talking about like, well, you deal with all these kids in poverty and stuff like that. And I was like, well, what can we do about it? And they're like, well, there's nothing you can really do. And I was like, so I just got like really depressed. And
yeah.
I was like, all right, well, maybe if I can, if I can at least help one kid, you know, because when you think about when you're in school, like that one teacher or a handful of teachers that really, you know, really motivated you or, you know, they stick in your head, maybe like a coach or something like that. Like maybe I could go do that. And I ended up applying for the major and I didn't get in. And I was shocked because I was like, well, I have a 4.0. Why don't you want me? You know, so I had this really bad rejection.
And I'm a veteran, and I was told that everybody wants veterans, right?
Right. So I'm stuck with rejection now. And I ended up having a conversation with people that are about to graduate or have graduated, and they told me like, yeah, the like this major isn't really good at Ohio State. Like you don't want to be a part of the education major. Not to talk shit on education. But that's what I learned, and I've talked to people now that were in my class, like they dropped out, like they left as well.
Wow.
Yeah, because they had such a bad experience with it. And I ended up talking to an administrator too, and she's like, "Why?" She's like, "Yeah, you should have gotten in. Like, I don't understand who was reviewing your application." So it was a really interesting experience, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to really do this anymore. So then I was like, well, what do I like? And I was like, well, I've always had a thing for history. So then I was like, maybe I'll go get a history degree, and then maybe I'll get into like business, or like I'll go to like a law school. So I always had like a graduate degree in mind.
Sure.
And so I started history, and then I realized that like every assignment's like 10 pages long. You had to write like 10 pages on stuff like that. And a lot of the stuff I was studying I didn't like. So like we had to like do like environmental history, and I was like, this is really boring. I don't want to like study like lead gasoline for a whole semester.
Right.
And at the time, I was getting heavier into drinking. I was getting more into, you know, a lot of other stuff in my head. And it kind of came to a point where I was like, this is not what I like to do. I got to hit the restart. So I ended up dropping out. I got connected with a program called Save a Warrior. And I went to their program. So it's like a 5-day inpatient kind of program. I went through that, and they taught me a lot of like good coping skills and stuff. So I learned I like to meditate, just they call it warrior meditation. So it's like a form of transcendental meditation.
You ever read that?
I have not.
I just finished it. How to Meditate by Lawrence LaShawn. If anybody's interested in starting this practice, this would be the book, or any that you have in mind. I'm a big fan too. That's great that you did that. Nice.
Yeah. So what's different about their program is that they don't just look about like military trauma. They go all the way back to childhood, and they look at like your ACEs and all types of other stuff. And they do a bunch of like different like you'll do like equine therapy or so we did horses. We did like a ropes confidence course. We did some team building exercises. We did like mandalas. Trying to think what else was in there. What is that called? Have you heard of the hero's journey?
Yeah.
So we went through like the hero's journey. We did like film studies. So you like view films of like how it does like an arc of like heroes. So it was like a really great experience in like 5 days. Like it's life changing, obviously.
No doubt.
So it really like refocused me, reset me up on the right path. And while I was there, I met a person who was a social worker,
Mhm.
and they were like, "You should." And obviously, I mean, they're going to advocate. They're like, "You guys
Yeah,
should be social workers. You know, this
yeah,
is
yeah,
gonna
sure.
be." Which is something I was told before when I go to like a VA appointment. And she's like, "Well, you want to help people? Maybe you should be a social worker." And I was like,
Mm.
"I don't feel like sitting in a room is for me, and like talking to people about stuff. Like, I don't know if I can do that day in and day out." Um, and then you get exposed to like other people's traumas, and that affects you as well.
Sure.
So that's like one thing that I always worry about. Um, so then I ended up looking to social work, obviously.
Hmm.
Um, and the one thing that got me was the social justice aspect. So I went back to what I saw at the NatCon, and I was like, all right, so this is an opportunity to like maybe do like advocacy or policy or stuff like that.
Yeah,
This could be my option. And the one thing I loved about social work is like it was multifaceted. You could work anywhere and do anything pretty much. Social workers
mhm,
are everywhere. They're not just a counselor sitting in a room talking to you.
sure.
Which that kind of made me look back at my Marine Corps experience because, like, yeah, I was a truck driver, but like I'm a rifleman, or
Right.
I could be an admin person at the same time. I
Swiss
did
Army knife, man.
right, and that was the thing that really propelled me and pushed me. So I went, I guess, like try like a broad focus and then try to
Hmm.
narrow your scope is like the
Yeah.
best way to go. And there's a book called Range that was recommended. I haven't read it yet, but that's one thing that I'm looking like. Pat Tillman Society recommended that to us,
Okay.
so I'm gonna probably read that next.
Range.
Range, yeah.
Okay.
And then for like military transition books, What It's Like to Go to War by Carl Marlantes. I've actually met him. He's a pretty cool guy. He's a
Hmm.
Vietnam veteran. Um, he got like the Navy Cross, which he talks about like in his book. He kind of like talks about like I didn't really deserve it. Like people just saw me do stuff. He's like I saw other people do heroic actions, but no one put them up for awards. He
Hmm.
goes like that's just pretty much it. It's like luck of the draw. And he said he got so at one point he was working at the Pentagon while he's still in the Marines, and like every week he seemed like get a new award. And he's like talking how people were making fun of him, like, "Oh, you got another award today, huh?" He's like,
Yeah, that's great.
"Yeah."
That's great.
So yeah, yeah. I guess I mean Tribe was another good book, obviously, because a lot of
Yeah,
people read Sebastian
sure,
Younger,
sure.
and then I guess watching as many documentaries as I can too. Like
Yeah.
HBO has a couple good ones.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I guess so that kind of got me in the path here, and then apply for everything. So like
Hmm.
I've looked at a lot of fellowships. I've done a lot of fellowships, I guess too.
Hmm.
So I did like a leadership fellowship with Student Veterans of America. I did a legislative fellowship with VFW and Student Veterans of America,
Hmm.
which I then wrote a policy proposal, and that policy proposal has now been introduced in the Senate. So that's
Nice.
yeah,
Congrats.
thank you. So now I just got like another probably year or two of fighting to get that passed in the law.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, we're about
Yeah.
halfway there. So
Okay. Yeah, I was introduced to you through Colonel Cullen, who forwarded me an article. Please forgive the screaming toddler in the background. Um, Both of them. Um, um, on a piece of legislation that had been passed or pushed through from the DoD, I believe. Is that the one you're referring to?
So it's a transition bill. So it straddles both armed services, which covers DoD, and veteran affairs, covers
Okay. Okay.
VA.
Okay.
So pretty much they're going to add a mental health component to the TAP program. So pretty
Nice.
much everything that we talked about, like finding your why,
Hmm.
substance abuse and self-medicating, grieving, identity crisis, isolation,
Hmm.
suicide, um, empathy. Like that's a
Hmm.
big thing. Like a lot of
Yeah.
us like don't have that. We've kind of gotten rid of our empathy, or viewing weakness as, like vulnerability is weakness. You
Right.
got to take that armor off.
Yeah.
Like that's one thing that I would like for these guys to know.
Sure.
'Cause one of the big things when I went to that seminar in North Carolina for the Raider Project, the first thing he said to me goes, "I just want to go in front of every person who's transitioning, say, in about 6 months you're gonna want to kill yourself, and here's why." And I
Mm.
was like, "Shit, the guy's right." Like,
Wow.
like that's exactly how I felt. Like, like I'm floundering. I don't know what I'm doing with my
Yep.
life,
Yep.
and like I don't, and I'm just tired. And that's
Yeah.
really what
Yeah.
leads you on that path. Like you're just tired. You
Yeah.
don't know you can't get your head above the water, and you're just
Right.
suffocating. And
Right.
that's kind of where I was.
I got a buddy, Aaron Blaine, who I interviewed for the first one of these that people hopefully have heard by the time they listen to this one. He said, he talked about this high tempo, of military culture. He said, I had to learn how to take a knee. Like I had to learn how to do that, and how to know when to take a knee. Like what are the things that indicate to me time to like um, turn the throttle down a bit. Um, I think it's so crucial what you just said. You and I would know and be familiar with the idea that it's not depression, it's not trauma, it's not um, bankruptcy, it's not divorce or separation that ends up or that contributes to people killing themselves. It's hopelessness about those things. Like what I'm feeling as a result of that will never go away, or this will never get any better. I'll never not be depressed, or I'll never not be floundering. I think it's so crucial for people to hear what you're saying, and that we both experience of like there's an end to that, and to some degree to normalize the process of like the floundering isn't always unproductive, and it's not forever, so long as we take advantage of some of these protocols and ideas and suggestions that people before us have recommended, like you're doing now. It doesn't have to be forever.
Are you familiar? I think this is, I'm probably off a little bit on the numbers, but I think if you feel like somebody has suicidal ideation, you're always supposed to ask them, or you feel like hurting yourself or killing yourself and stuff like that. And when you ask them that, like they're like 80% less likely to hurt themselves because
Mm-hmm.
you normalize that situation to them.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing that I always want to like push to people is like, they're already thinking about killing themselves. You telling that is not going to put that in their head. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you're
So
gonna, yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
And I noticed this. So like one day I was just like on Facebook and I noticed like one of the guys from one of the units I was in was like writing some shit.
Yeah.
And I reached out to him and I had a conversation with him, and like immediately after the conversation I noticed a 180.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I pretty much told him like what we're talking about now, like this is normal. This is a process. I can't tell you when that process is gonna end. That's for you to decide.
Yeah.
And like if you need me, I'm a resource here and I can help you through that process.
Love it.
But that's pretty much that was like the gist of our conversation, because he was going through like legal troubles. You know, he dealing with like his sexual orientation.
Sure.
A lot of family issues as well. And
Sure.
I was like, I understand like you're hurting and all this stuff is going through, but this too shall pass. And like just try not to do anything rash or anything dumb. And that if
we do these, this is a pitch anyway for suicide prevention program for anybody interested in learning how to assess or look at some of those red flags, or actually develop those tools to ask about suicide and intervene and prevent suicide, because it is preventable. We do reach trainings that have been a little bit modified due to the pandemic, but now we're doing reach out trainings, and they're open reach trainings that you can find on our website. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that at all, or if you ever did one.
I've done it twice now, because I think we have to do it for VCA training.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. I might have done one with the VCAs. I don't know if we cross paths there or not. But that you brought up a good point, that we emphasize that it is a myth that asking about suicide is going to put it in someone's head. And to your point, statistically, it greatly reduces the likelihood of suicidal behavior and attempts by how we talk about it, if we talk about it in a constructive and healthy way, like you're discussing. I love that you initiated that too. So that's not easy for everybody to do at all. I think there's like, I don't know, concern about making it awkward or making the friendship shaky or whatever else. We talk about and say it's better to lose a friendship than a friend. But I'm curious if you'd speak to some of those maybe barriers that you've experienced or heard other people express to you that make it difficult even to ask battle buddies and loved ones about their safety and things like that.
Yeah, I think of it as like, so it's like we talked about the myth, but I think it's also like having that uncomfortable conversation. Because it can turn the wrong way. I've talked to some people before where, they've heard my story and they've talked to me afterwards, and they're like, hey, I'm going through this right now. Can you help me? But I've had other people say like, well, that's just because they're weak. If you kill yourself, you're weak. And then I've also, it's gone either way. It's hit or miss, I guess you could say. So I've lost quite a few people to suicide. And that's the reason why I wrote that bill. Within I think it was I got out in June, and by the end of that month, I'd already lost one person, and then beginning of July, I lost another person, and then halfway through July, my company guns was killed in the Chattanooga terrorist attack. So I
Yeah.
lost 3 people I served with in 2 months.
Wow.
And
I'm
then,
sorry.
yeah, it's, it is what it is, I guess. I don't, thank you though.
Mm.
It's life. And yeah, they, we've lost more now since, and I think I've lost about 7 or 8 people I served with,
Yeah.
through either suicide or, just, regular, other accidents or other things that happen. Once again, that happens in life, so you got to grieve through it and work
Yeah.
through it and stuff. Um,
Yeah.
so that was kind of my way of thinking. Like, I would much rather talk to this person for like an hour than drive halfway across the country and sit there for a day through their funeral again.
Mm.
And that's one thing I've been to too many funerals already,
Yeah.
and I don't want to sit through that anymore. So it is awkward at first. You kind of gotta, because I had a little bit of anxiety with it too,
Sure.
because I don't know how this person's gonna react if you
Sure.
reach out and talk to them, and
Yeah.
maybe they're gonna be pissed. But if they're pissed and they don't kill themselves, and I succeeded,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
that's kind of like the best way, I guess.
Yeah. Not to sound like a hard ass, but like again to generalize, like I've been uncomfortable before, like and so all the other veterans that you and I are talking to, we've been uncomfortable before, and this is just a new type of discomfort, but it's well worth it. Um, and that's not to make it sound too harsher or I think you know what I'm trying to say. Not to minimize it at all, but it's like we've been uncomfortable before, like, and we're taught to and trained to tolerate that discomfort. This is just a kind of a new way of expressing that or using maybe that skill in a life saving setting
I kind of view it
situation.
as like a public speaking class I took where you're supposed to like take those nervous feelings and put them into your speech.
Mm,
So like pretty much use that uncomfortable feeling and use that. So
that's
it's
helpful.
or maybe like an acting class would probably be like another good example, like how you like take that.
That's
Um,
helpful.
yeah, I heard a so I guess maybe training's like the best way. Like if you train
Hmm.
enough, because I heard a podcast about an actor who talks about like you do the work, you get everything prepared because he's a stage actor, and he goes, then you just go out and do it. You just leave everything out there. So he wouldn't go to the set or like the theater like and sit there like all day long like he used to because he like look over his lines and do all this stuff. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
I already did all the work, I put it all in there. So he would like show up like maybe like 5 minutes before like current call, get dressed, and like just go out and do it. And
Trust the
like
process.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the kind
Yeah.
of thing like you got to trust yourself. You got to do everything, and maybe tonight I'm better than this night or that night. But like that's
Yeah.
just what it is. I've put the work in.
Yeah, I don't mean to beat the analogies to death, but and generalize and draw so many comparisons, but it is pretty damn comparable. Like you you might still feel nervous clearing a room, but you've done it 100 times in your head or at training, and you trust the process and execute. Um, I think we got to add this to our repertoire of tools and training. So final pitch and shout out for a reach program and training and reach out training breaks it down to really concrete, practical um, educational tidbits, and then also skills regarding the reach program in particular. So yeah, yeah. So what's next for you?
So I have a field placement for next semester. So I'm taking 18 credit hours as my last semester because
Oof.
I love hurting myself.
Yes, right. Yeah. That
Love
sounds
that.
like a Marine, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll be working 30 hours at the Ohio Poverty Law Center.
Wow.
So I'll be working at eviction courts. I'll be working going through the Ohio budget and looking at policies to lobby the state house.
Yeah.
Um, I'll be working, I think it's the Ohio Veterans Task Force, so I'll be working with them as well.
Nice.
And then I'll be working with the Legal Aid Society as well with their clients.
You got a busy semester coming up.
Well, I like how you can do so many different things in one field placement. That's what I was searching for. So I'm
Sure.
trying to get the most I can out of my experience.
Sure.
And then just a couple electives. So I'm focusing on like youth development programs is
Hmm.
what the it's like looking at the macro level and also like how to like teach kids through like sports therapy pretty much.
Cool.
So that's my two electives that I'm doing, and then I'll graduate. After that, so hopefully I get in the MPA program. I just put my
Yeah.
application in yesterday.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm
It's
excited
a
about that.
relief.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Good deal.
So I'm looking at a couple fellowships. So I'm probably going to try to go to DC this summer,
Okay.
either through the Washington Center. They have a vet initiative program. So they set you up with housing, $2,000 stipend, and
Mhm.
then they'll put you with like an internship somewhere. They
Okay.
have like you normally have to find it yourself, but they can assist, which is
Okay.
fine with
Okay.
me. They also on Fridays you do like developments and stuff. You do like
Okay.
workshops and stuff with them as well.
Nice.
And then I'm looking at there's another program. I think it's called I can't remember what it's called, but it's through the State Department, so it's like a fellowship that they have,
Okay.
and they house you at Howard University, and then you pretty much do like a whole I guess semester long like seminar kind of like
Okay.
workshops and stuff like that on like foreign policy and stuff like that. So
Sounds exciting, important.
yeah, so those are the two that I'm looking at to like. So I'm gonna apply to both because like the State Department one's very competitive.
Okay.
I would imagine the Washington Center is competitive too, but I feel like I got a better chance of like that's an easier one for me to get into.
And we're
Uh,
veterans, man. They're gonna say yes to us. You know.
yeah.
Yeah. No. Good
um,
luck on both of those.
Thank you. And then after that, so once I start the MPA program, I'm looking at they have what they call the MPA DC program. So you
Okay.
spend your first year in Columbus doing that, and then the second
Okay.
year you go to DC, you live there, and you pretty much work at an agency, pretty much wherever you want. So I'm
Okay.
looking at possibly working on Capitol Hill, or maybe trying to get like a White House fellowship, or try and go State Department or something like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So trying to see all that because truthfully, I still don't know where I'm going to land.
Sure.
I've kind of broken it down like micro, macro, meso. I said those out of order, so that's kind of funny.
All good.
So like micro, I'm now kind of looking at maybe starting like a nonprofit.
Mhm.
Um, there's a Seattle-based nonprofit called Vertical Generation where they do youth development
Okay.
through rock climbing, and I become
Mm.
like a big rock climber.
Nice.
Uh, so like that's like one of the my self care is like going to rock climbing stuff. So like
Yeah.
going to do
Cool.
the gym or climbing outside, getting into nature and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, so that's one thing, and I actually use that idea for one of my classes. So I pretty much worked out like the whole curriculum and everything on how to do it now. So now I just need to like pretty much set up like the 501(c)(3) and like get the
Nice.
funds and find the
Yeah.
people. But yeah, so that kind of helped by taking a class this semester.
Sure. Sure.
uh,
Yeah. No doubt.
and then obviously Mezzo is going to be my advocacy. So either
Mhm.
working for a member of Congress or working for a nonprofit and advocating, probably on the federal level.
Okay.
And then if I get into the macro stuff, it would probably be like working for the State Department as like a foreign service officer,
Okay.
which is a very difficult process to do.
Mm. Mm. Okay.
You got to take exams and yeah, I go through like there's a lot of red tape.
Got it.
Or
Sounds like the
possibly
government. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Got to get that top secret.
Yeah.
And then, or being like a human rights officer for the UN. So
Okay.
maybe working overseas doing that.
Cool. Well, like you mentioned, there's a flexible degree and career path is pretty exciting. I think that's
Yeah.
important for people to know too. Like I've heard a lot of people say that a lot of the resources available to people transitioning, there's just this giant assumption that you did this in the military, here's the civilian equivalent. It's like a lot of people don't have a desire to do that anymore. So love hearing and helpful to hear that you're not stuck to that, and that there are a lot of options and okay to flounder and just flounder upward, in a general positive trajectory, but there'll be things available. So, well, hey, in light of all that you're sharing, I know that you're doing quite a bit right now as well. So I can't thank you enough for spending an hour with me. And I know this will be a benefit to a lot of people who here on our campus and those beyond. So thank you for your time. Thanks for what you did for our country. Thanks for what you did for um, fellow Marines and others from the military as well. Appreciate you.
Thank you.